is bringing all this wealth. Like,
PERMAJAM.
You rolling?
Good day, relatives. This is me, John Lee Rucker from PERMAJAM, and I'm excited and happy and grateful and honored to be sitting with grandmother Patricia Ann Davis, who's an international teacher, a traditional healer, and diagnostician. She's come all this way from New Mexico, and she's going to share with you centuries worth of knowledge and her lifetime's work of translation of the traditional Diné Navajo language and understanding for all of you. And it's my wish, my hope that what she's going to share with us is going to ripple out into the world and is going to touch all of you in a really positive way and ripple on even to the next generation. So thank you for being with us today, Grandmother.
And thank you for this precious time. Thank you, John. It is customary in my late father's tribe to give a full introduction of my lineage and who I am, what I'm doing, why I'm doing what I'm doing, how I am in this time and place. So I would like to start with that before describing my work, giving an introduction and some orientation about it, and then some question and answer time. And I have a English name, I have a Diné name. It is used only in ceremony. Patricia Ann Davis in Xie. That means that's what I'm called. Tkachibi is my father's clan, but I start with my mother because that is how we were all born. Every child is born through the water and in their father's footstep and image. And then I will translate what he said. I'm a Mississippi band of Choctaw and Shlim, Tkachibi, Bashalchin, and Choctaw, Diné, Edishache, Kiaani, Edishanel, Ado, Diyan, Diné, Beja, and Shlim, Doni, Higlin. That is an introduction that lets my relatives know that my mother's lineage is the Mississippi Band of Choctaw and my father's lineage is Diné. Even though we're saying Navajo, I use the phrase Diyan Diné, Beja and Shlim, which is we're all a precious, holy, sacred child of Creator within creation simultaneously, and everyone is equally a precious child of Creator. It's an affirmation in the introduction, as well as letting people know the matrilineal line that I'm born into. And I have traveled to 9 different countries. This indigenous ceremonial change process that I named, translated and simplified, has been translated into Spanish and French and Russian. Because when I say and I greet everyone, Ya'ate, Shike, Shadane, there is no way, I'd like to emphasize that it is impossible to say, but not you. So what I'm teaching is not religion, it's not philosophy, it's not a theory, it's not a belief system. It is the laws that govern us. It is the laws of nature, the natural order that govern all of us. So we're in a state of hozoh. I'll describe hozoh. That is an all-encompassing concept of holiness with H, wholeness with W, and nobody can use their competing ideologies from their competing collectivities in any way to polarize people unnecessary and perpetual conflict and warfare. So the language is speaking in a cross-culturally, including all races of people, in any land and any language that's cross-cultural. It's intergenerational. That means that instead of the knowledge and resource going from the poor to the rich this way in a win-lose, then it's going from elder to youth this way clockwise. That's the win-win. And I'll describe that more in detail. That is called a reframe in English, because we can't reform anything morally, ethically wrong, which we've been taught to make choices that perpetuate win-lose, destructive, and death choices, when in fact indigenous and tribal languages speak in the natural order. The vibration is of making the choices for how do we all win with our gift for our collective survival to design the co-creative solution. And that is win-win, constructive and life-affirming choice. So that's all built into every person. All I'm doing is saying, remember, reawaken, we forgot, or nobody told us. It's not complicated, it's not complex, it's not hard. It's the way that we're existing. And we've been conditioned and we have been programmed to forget, and we've been telling our body wrong information. So how did I come to do this work? First of all, my father told me at a very young age, because he is my teacher and my uncle and clan relatives of the Tachi and Kiahani. In my growing up years, my childhood, the Navajo Nation, the Netkakea, which is the people's land, or the holy people's land. We're all the holy people. We're all children and grandchildren of the holy people. They're our ancestors. And that's because we're all born in the holy circle. So there's also no way to say I'm born higher or lower than you or anybody else. There's no orientation for hierarchy, patriarchy, or status in such a way that it devalues or dehumanizes a person. It's validating and affirming, and I call it the affirmative thinking system. And so he told me to undo the thinking that caused our people, meaning indigenous people, so much violence and suffering in the world. And that's something that I had to figure out how to go about it. And I had to do the work. All he did was put me on that path, initiate me to the healing system that he learned and that has been used for generations and centuries. It's oral tradition. It is not published in the Western literature. And he told me at a young age, and then he reinforced it throughout my life. As well as I had been told by other people who were what I would call a conduit for the spiritual realm, who reminded me in 2000 that it is time to give this knowledge, because people who carried this knowledge and were persecuted throughout the centuries needed to bring that out into the general public because it was needed at this time. And so that's why then I went to University of Arizona, and earned a bachelor's in developmental psychology. Then worked in health and human services for over 20 years, behavioral health, mental health, social services. Handled federal, state, county, tribal contracts for accountability and client services. So I worked in the system, and I know what doesn't work and why it doesn't work. And I did my best to bring what I call wellness restoration into a system based on pathology. And pathology only means any out of balance condition. The master's degree was from Antioch University in the Center for Creative Change, and that's in whole systems design. That means that that's the language and techniques of creative change. Well, that's when I translated the Blessed Way ceremony into the indigenous ceremonial change process, which is simplified and translated and designed to teach, because healing is for all people. And there's no healing in blaming. People are equally wounded. We're in this transgenerational trauma and woundedness. So perpetrator is, by definition, those who design the rule, the law, the regulation to perpetually benefit by it, the win. And then people of color and women historically have had to agree to lose and pay to lose. So they blame the victim and collect. So the victim then has a being wound, and the perpetrator has a doing wound, but they're equally wounded. So it's only the what I call it, the elegant solution is love, because the whole essence and substance of the universe is love. And people are only denying this. This denial then is produces the deception and the lies, and then the deviousness, which is scheming and conning to win, and then defiance. And so this is the background for following the ceremonial process, which I will describe in detail, and we can get into in more of the orientation and question and answer, giving an overall picture of the need for this knowledge at this time. Then the people who seem to respond are all the young people, because they need to hear what they already know. And it's for the young people to not hear me, to not be recruited to participate in their own demise by the erroneous choices that we've been socially conditioned to previously. And because it's needed at these times of crises, more people are waking up to their true spiritual identity. What does that mean, our true spiritual identity? Truth is the only real power, and it's our protection. But then, what is truth? People ask me, does it work? Meaning, does this indigenous ceremonial change process that I'm going to describe in detail, does it really work? And my question to them is, does the sun really work? How about the water? Does it work? Tell me about the fire. Does it work? Like to heat us and cook food. And how about the earth? Does it work? Does your in-breath and out-breath, does it work? So it has to be presented in such a way of translating what it means to be a precious child of Creator within creation simultaneously. And that is the context, that is the container for this treasure knowledge from indigenous wisdom and knowledge, is that every person, our body is of the earth element. And in the Navajo language, we can describe it as Zithlej, which is mountain dirt. Zith means mountain. Zith is also a word that means spiritual strength. So that our body is made of the mountain dirt, which is of spiritual strength. And then we're 70% or more water within us. And then fire is temperature. So we leave the body, exit the body if that temperature is too low or too high. So that temperature, that fire must be at a certain level. And then air. The is the holy, sacred Creator's breath. Well, what exactly does that mean? The perfect peace and love of Creator that radiate to the physical sun, to the plant, not set in the holy plant people. And there we have oxygen and expel carbon dioxide. So we're moving around, we're making a sound. So our constitution is earth, water, fire, and air. And then we are simultaneously in the environment of earth, water, fire, and air. So no one can be outside of it or separate from it. No one can have power over it, no one can destroy it or pervert it, or no one can take our power away, or we can't give our power away. But as I said earlier, people are only denied it. So hear me when I say life is simple, it's yes and no, and what we say yes and no to. So people are choosing to deny. And then live the consequences of that decision. So that's where the precious child of Creator within creation, that is telling you the details of what does that really mean. Translate it. And then I'll go into spiritual words that talk about each and every one of us. And then I'll pause and see where we're at, what I have said, and we could continue with a question or two. The words that are collectively including all people, any land, and any language is which is the earth's surface people. So that doesn't leave anybody out. And again, five-fingered people, five-fingered people refers to us as humane beings with the E, humane beings. And that's why we must choose love and peace and abundance and plenitude. When people are choosing fear, which is a call for love, or choosing guilt, which is a call for peace, and choosing scarcity, which is a call for abundance, and fear cannot coexist with love, and peace cannot coexist with it, with guilt, and abundance, scarcity cannot coexist with abundance. So that's a proof that we're making a wrong choice. I'm asking people to just use their whole brain thinking for its appropriate function. Whole brain thinking synonymously is conscience, intuition, and the creative imagination to design the co-creative solution. So, hozoh and sakes is holy thinking and clear and congruent thinking. So all of this terminology that I'm using in English is from a thinking system that I call affirmative thinking system, which is within hozoh interpretation. And then that's what the reframe is, to take people out of consciousness and perception, because reality is only relative to perception using consciousness. That is where the perpetual adversary conflict and warfare takes place, because it requires conversion. We have had to submit to being taken out of our sacred place in a sacred place in the universe, and accept or have it imposed, external oppression, and internalize that oppression in the inverse thinking system as a deficiency. So our tribal language also has the concept of a deficient self-image and no remediation process towards some end state, like being civilized or salvation or redemption, even evolution or enlightenment, because that's existing within us in hozoh, and we exist in hozoh. So I'll pause here for clarification from you in terms of what I've said overall.
Clarification. So we're seeing, from what you're sharing with us, that it's a way of thinking, and the choices that humanity is making because of that way of thinking, dualistic thinking, deficient self-image, which is causing humanity to make these destructive life choices. And that's why we see so much out of balance today. We see, human bodies out of balance, health out of balance, environments, ecosystems out of balance, economic systems out of balance, everything out of balance. And it's because of the choices that we're making from our way that we've been programmed to see a deficient self-image, to see ourselves as separate from the web of life, separate from the elements, separate from creation, which we are living inside of. So thank you for saying all of that now.
Exactly. Yes.
And then, so the goal here, what we're sharing with the relatives at home, is to undo this thinking, right? And there's a ceremonial process that you describe, the Blessed Way ceremony, which you translated from Diné into English. And simplified, yeah. And we've started to go into this process already, naming the out of balance condition and the root cause. But can you really, can we go through this process for those of us at home so that we can really undo this thinking?
Yes. Let me name what you're describing. And I call it the empire of folly, which we're repeating. That is taking something in the natural nature law that governs all of us and making it unreal and making trade and commerce real. So that's a conflict of interests, and it's ownership and stewardship. And then what you're describing, dualistic thinking, is compartmentalized thinking, for and against, right and wrong, good and bad. Right here is the belief in mind-body dichotomy, that those who think that they exist outside of and separate from nature are the ones destroying the planet and the environment and the humanity. And so there are 4 out of balance conditions, and that is the denial of oneness. There is this one, vertical, male dominate, female submit. And there's a lot to teach about that. And the reframe for that is on the earth there's 4 directions. And right here, how we are existing is the divine feminine, divine masculine. So life giver, nurturer, protector, provider, and the healthy helping teamwork here to govern and to heal and to protect and to perpetuate the blessed way of life. That's how we're built, and there is no male dominance, female submission. It's the 4 directions on the earth.
Yeah.
And so then there's the belief in the deficient self-image, and then dualistic thinking. Those are 4 out of balance conditions.
Yeah. Denial of oneness, and then the domination of male over female. That they're very connected, because if we were to understand and agree to our oneness there, then we see that the masculine and feminine must coexist in harmony and balance, not one over the other.
So that has caused animosity and aggression within females and animosity and aggression within the male, because that's what is causing the root cause of undoing, or people forgetting that the female is a life giver and nurturer, and mother's lineage, and the father is a protector, provider. The men who protect and the men who are the providers of their companion, their home, their children, grandchildren, of the earth elements. Take care of it, they'll take care of you, the steward. These 4 elements and our garden, our food, livestock, the fireplace, our cooking, our water, community. So that's our solution, is restoring community and belonging, that we belong.
Well, it really makes sense to me, it feels true in my soul that, a man is a protector and a provider, and a woman is a nurturer. I was struck when we were speaking yesterday about how, the male is supposed to be a protector and a provider, but we've come to, throughout centuries where men have been the ones inflicting suffering, inflicting violence and rape upon the people and upon the earth.
And war.
And what a...
Rape and war.
Yeah, what a disconnection that is from who we really are,
Well, let's reframe our thinking, because in the home and in the community and even in the world governments, the original purpose for a male identity as protector, provider, as I described, and the healthy teamwork with the life giver, nurturer, for procreation and community and belonging, is now in a state of perpetrator and sexual predator. And that just means that that rape and war are very connected to what we're seeing today in missing and murdered Indigenous women. And I thank you for videotaping today, John, because I am an Indigenous elder traditional person, and we're the least heard in the whole of all people on the earth, is the elder Indigenous female. And we're also considered a conquered people with no voice. We're exiled in our own country, we're refugees in our own country. And this knowledge, revitalizing our Indigenous language and culture, and teaching and inspiring other people, has a purpose of dispelling and undoing all of those lies that we've been told, wrong information. I call that criminal mind, to use our thinking for what it's not for, and tell our body wrong information. So that's why it's just yes and no. And a reminder that there's no reward in us believing that a spiritual path is pain and suffering, because then there are only 2 addictions: the pleasure of inflicting pain, and those receiving the pain believing that they're going to earn a reward from it, so they're equally addicted. So only the compassion, empathy, love, and healing. What is healing? Healing is not coping, it's correcting, naming the out of balance and identifying the root cause that keeps it out of balance. And that is the process in which we're governed by. Those are the laws that govern us. So let's use them for what they're for. Let's use our thinking for its appropriate function in our decision making and in our choices. That is what is being humane. So we can go into the details of this process.
Yes, please. It'd be lovely.
Let me put it up here so that I can use it. There is a top circle and a bottom circle on this illustration. and then there's a pathway, and it shows the sequencing. So I'm going to describe the bottom circle. It's a closed circle. It's a design failure because it is the win-lose. Nobody wins, destructive and death-producing choices and decision outcome. That is what people are in. You're trapped and entrenched, which means don't know that we don't know that we're trapped and entrenched in the thinking system that Einstein said we can't solve anything with the same thinking. And so a reframe is must restore our thinking. The wellness restoration is restore our thinking to tell our body just the correct information. So there's a sequencing to it, and all of the ceremony follow the sequencing. And when we're acknowledging and having gratitude for our alignment within the natural order and the laws that govern us, then we're not the one overcoming anything. We're not the one resisting anything. We're not the one fighting for anything. We're living in harmony and balance the way that we're instructed. Number one is the naming of the out of balance condition and identifying the root cause. So I'll give you an example. We have been, this country, United States, America, in a war for over a decade. That's an out of balance condition. The war within is projected outward into enemy creation. And because you're my enemy, then you have something I don't have. Through jealousy, you have something I don't have, which is a cosmic lie. We've been given equally our inherent divinity, our inherent gift, our inherent sovereignty, and our inherent soul purpose and life mission, so to speak. And then we say, you have something that I don't have, so I have to kill you to get it. So we dehumanize and devalue, and then we vampire and devour their land and resources. That empire folly is invasion, genocide, and plunder. Invasion and mass murder and mass theft and pillage. So that is a out of balance condition. Defend. Well, defend means attack, retaliate, revenge for generations and centuries, because we don't have to defend the truth. It just is. So protection means to shield ourselves from any toxicity in our environment that we would internalize. And then it becomes stagnant, and then we get sick, and we have all these diseases, and then we're not doing our work to teach others how to. So this process, it's sequencing, is a how-to. It's the how-to. So let me also describe in this sequencing, naming the out of balance condition, identifying the root cause that maintains that out of balance condition. That's our addiction to greed. The root cause, I'm going to just say arbitrarily for our purposes today as an example, that most people would understand, our addiction to greed. And that just means never enough and never satisfied. That's the consumer mentality of jealousy, of devouring and someone else's life energy. And then there's a belief in sacrifice. No, we're here to serve, not sacrifice. We're here to serve. The next phase is emptying. So the first one we call it desti, and the second one we call it ilko, and that is to talk things out, cry it out, dance, sing, drum, vomit, sweat, the stagnant energy that we're collecting and stuffing in our body of the maladaptive emotions. Hate, envy, greed, jealousy, anger, shame, guilt, fear, lust, as a confusion with love. Because that lust also is combined with jealousy and anger. And it's a sickness. And it's infectious. And so there are medicinal herbs, there are ways to empty. So the second phase is empty in a safe and supportive environment. That safe and supportive environment requires no judgment, no punishment, no condemnation. Just allowing a person to empty in a safe and supportive environment. So we need to design these places. This is the main concept, the key to healing that doesn't exist anywhere in the Western world. And it exists in indigenous tribal languages and cultures. Then the reframe, oh, I can see through this lens of my own spiritual identity and my own correction that I have to figure out in my personal life, professional life, community life, family life, what is sufficient, what is enough, what is the self-sufficiency that I am satisfied and that is joyful. And so pleasure and pain are a mood change, and they're a substitute for the true joy and fulfillment of our spiritual identity. So that's where the never satisfied and never enough feeling is out of balance. So the reframe is because we can't reform anything morally, ethically wrong. And I could name them like interest and taxes and debt, which we have no words for. There's no words for evil. There's no words for military. There's no words for bombs and guns and king and queens and emperors and power over. And there's no context, no container, and no concept for those words. There's only words that describe being out of balance as very diagnostic, like a word for describing people who use their five senses as a weapon against themselves and others. So when we hurt ourselves, we hurt others. When we hurt others, we hurt ourselves. So there's words that describe, they're diagnostic for correction, not punishment and condemnation and blame and scolding and causing more harm and pain to that person. That's the reframe. The reframe is restoring the wellness, restoration, or remembering, reawakening, reclaiming, restoring our whole brain thinking and our conscience. And that can only happen after the first two phases. We know what to say yes and no to correctly. And then the blessed way is hozoh, blessed way of life. Literally, I had my father's brother, his wife is Aunt Faye, and she told us that the literal translation of hozoh, which is translated to a blessed way ceremony, is living the loving way as a way of life. How about that? Living the loving way as a way of life. So that's the path that we're born into. And then I'll describe that when I get to the manifestation of it, the choice for that way of life in our personal, professional, family, community way of life. How do we have a conversation about using our gifts for our collective survival? That's practical. Every day, when I make a decision, then I'm not devious and scheming about how I'm going to win over you by devaluing you and vampiring your energy, your life force.
Mm-hmm.
How is it that we're going to co-create the solutions with your gift and my gift and everyone's gift?
Mm-hmm.
For the next generation
Mm-hmm.
of youth. Restore resources to the next generation of youth.
Mm-hmm.
That requires that self-reverence and reverence for life.
Mm-hmm.
And the phrase hozoh nasha, I'm walking eternal in the eternal, the now and the eternal now. I'm walking in this goodness and beauty and love and peace and joy and truth and good health and plenitude and abundance.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it said. It's saying that's manifesting it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm walking between Mother Earth and Father Sky in this reality of my spiritual identity, which is given to us equally.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the 4 phases. Name the out of balance condition, identify the root cause, and undo the root cause through the empty and correction, and reframe our thinking to its appropriate function, and then manifest that and make those choices.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we are in honoring our Blessed Grace ceremony, which the top circle is an illustration of and shows the exact details of a blessed way of life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Can I say is, this is a process, this ceremony, Blessed Way ceremony, that, where you come from, your people,
Mm-hmm.
everyone received this ceremony. Everyone had this ceremony. Ceremony was available, And now, for people at home, may have this, out of balance thinking, stagnant energy, and need this reframing, How can people go about this process themselves?
Knowing what to say yes and no to,
Mm-hmm.
which we just described.
Mm-hmm.
And no, it's not really true that we all had access to it,
Mm-hmm.
because we're the most federally legislated people of the whole earth
Mm-hmm.
on reservation.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that we were socially engineered at a system level and conditioned at a personal level to speak English and to be converted,
Mm-hmm.
to be acculturated.
Mm-hmm.
And so those 4, and to be, have violence perpetrated upon us. So no, people didn't have access to this.
Mm-hmm.
And they were told to be afraid of it,
Yeah.
like everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not going to happen anymore, because now we're making available
Mm-hmm.
to the general public,
Mm-hmm.
because there's nothing to hide, there's no mystery, there's no reason to, there's every reason to be transparent
Mm-hmm.
at this time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really a terrible thing what has happened to indigenous peoples from the arrival of the European conquest and the Spanish, and it's really obvious. You can see how indigenous people had lived on this continent for many generations in beautiful balance with healthy, beautiful ecosystems, and then this way of thinking that came and conquered over here had destroyed what had been stewarded and cared for many generations. In just very few generations have been totally destroyed, and that's a very obvious way for all of us to be able to see that way of thinking is totally out of balance. I want to ask you how the dualistic way of thinking and deficient self-image creates the symptoms that justifies that thinking.
We're all in peril.
Mm.
for and against, right and wrong, good and bad. That's compartmentalized, dualistic, binary thinking, then pits us against one another in the win-lose.
Mm-hmm.
So people are saying that dualism exists. Nothing in nature polarizes. Sunrise and sunset, whole brain thinking, right and left, divine feminine, divine masculine, everything that exists in cycles
Mm-hmm.
that replenish and restore us.
Mm-hmm.
So we affirm the reality of that truth, and whether we believe it, whether we trust it, whether we know about it or not, we're still governed by that law.
Mm-hmm.
It's universal and inclusive.
Mm-hmm.
So it's existing anyway. It's not anything that we can continue to ignore. So it's time. It's a good time for us to teach one another
Mm-hmm.
and accept each other equally, because violence doesn't work, acculturation doesn't work. That's one up and one down. And then resistance doesn't work because it's validating what the oppressive system is.
Mm-hmm.
What works is the how-to that we describe.
Mm-hmm.
That's what works, because that's what indigenous people use for generations and centuries.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
It has always worked. It's
Yes.
the only thing that really worked.
It's the only thing that works,
Yeah.
is to correct ourselves
Mm-hmm.
joyfully.
Mm-hmm. And you're right, it is a really beautiful time to remember that, because we're in a time where it's becoming very obvious that way of life that has been adopted here in the United States and many other parts of the world, it doesn't work. It's just been destructive.
So let us rejoice and celebrate.
Okay. Thank you very much,
Mm-hmm.
Grandmother.
Yes.
We'll continue.
Yeah. It's 12, so I don't want to
Oh,
interrupt.
yeah,
The
okay.
guy comes. And I'll-
Okay, so we'll take a pause.
Yeah, so we really don't need to go outside.
Unless you want to.
What do you think?
I think that's a lot.
Yeah.
There was a lot. It was really
And
good. Yeah.
and
I think we got, like, the lesson.
All right, good.
Yeah.
Right.
yeah. And sometimes people say, don't be negative. Well, okay, when you go to the doctor and when you go to have your car fixed, you don't tell the mechanic and pay them more than $100 an hour. Just don't be negative. And you go to the doctor and you see the x-rays and the blood tests and you say, don't be negative. And you shake their hands and say thank you and you give them big bucks.
Mm-hmm.
But when you start with naming and identifying and emptying, which is the process of undoing and dispelling, then that's what it requires, this process, in order for the reframe to design, to have group consensus and moral reasoning using conscience to design the co-creative solution.
Oh.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the video is off anyway, huh?
Yeah.
It's off.
What?
Do you teach courses?
I do. This is the open classroom. And I can't stay at home with all this. I would have died of cancer or diabetes or some kind of illness if I didn't do what I was told. And what does that mean? It means go and simplify and translate for the general public and look for the helpers and find who is ready for it and who's going to pick it up, and that's exponential.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, usually I have microphones right on my, the ones right on.
Yeah, those are good.
Yeah, and after all this talking for all these days, I'm being very careful to conserve my energy.
Sure.
But we captured it, right?
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Does that help, John?